Live from Pink Petro Studios just outside of Washington, D.C., I'm Dave Gardy, and this is Pink Petro TV. We have a really great program today with a live audience in Denver, Colorado at the UC Denver campus. We're also delighted to have a worldwide audience tuning in from the United States, Canada, Latin America, the Middle East, Europe, and Africa. The power of Pink Petro TV and the online community is our ability to connect great people and content to talk about what's important facing our industry today. So let's get to that. Energy companies have had a tough time over the past year trying to weather the storm of falling commodity prices. But the political and financial winds are creating a perfect storm, raising more above-ground problems at a time when we're going through massive change. How does political risk impact business? With America narrowing in on its choices for political candidates, come engage in a discussion about the future of our industry and the political risks we face as we enter the dawn of a new era in energy. Our stellar panel today in Denver will be leading us through a discussion about political risk. Our moderator is Jim Marchiori. He is the Executive Director of the Global Energy Management Program, or GEM, at the University of Colorado Denver Business School. For the past 7 years, GEM has been leading the way, utilizing technology to deliver energy-focused graduate business education to professionals around the world. Stephen Flaherty is the Director of State and Local Government Affairs for Halliburton. Stephen is based in Denver and is responsible for public policy and regulatory issues impacting the company. Brian Miller is Director of Government Relations and Communications at Noble Energy, and in this position, he and his team were accountable for managing local, state, and federal communications and government relations activities for all of the company's U.S. domestic operations. Tracy Bentley, Executive Director of the Colorado Petroleum Council and API, was scheduled to be with us today, but she's fallen ill, and we hope she feels better. We'll have Tracy on in a future program. Today's program allows you to participate. On Twitter, the hashtag is #PinkPetro. If you have a question or feedback, please submit online using the links on your browser. You may also email questions to membership@pinkpetro.com or refer to the email we sent you prior to the broadcast. Before we join Denver Live, let me turn it over to my co-host, the founder and CEO of Pink Petro in Houston, Katie Mehnert, who wants to say a few words about today's program. Katie?
Thanks, Dave. Hi, everybody. This is Katie Mehnert, founder and CEO of Pink Petro. I am so thrilled to have our members here today online, several guests across the globe. Pink Petro is an inclusive, progressive, and engaged community of professionals. And we are creating a new culture for learning, a new culture for workforce, and a new culture for the supply chain transformation happening today in our business. What does this mean? It means we're using technology to connect you to network, to connect you to learn, and to help you grow in your careers. Now, I know that it has been a very, very difficult time for all of us, but tough times call for innovation. Tough times call for new ways of doing things, and that's what we're doing. We're innovating here at Pink Petro. We want to use streaming technology, social technology to connect people across the world like no one has ever done before. So I want to thank our founders, Shell, Halliburton, and KPMG for their continued global support of Pink Petro. We have grown beyond 26 countries. This is very exciting. These are very innovative organizations who care about our future, and they are investing strategically in their workforces by providing programming like Pink Petro and the things you'll see here today. But I want to turn today to thank the sponsors of this program, and that is the University of Colorado Denver and their GEMS program. The Global Energy Management program is a hybrid master's degree, and it was built exclusively to prepare leaders like you in energy for the future. GEMS broke the mold. They contacted me several months ago and said, we'd like to sponsor your Her World Forum. Many of you might have had a chance to participate in that forum. It was broadcast live out of Halliburton's global headquarters in Houston, and we broadcasted that to 15 cities globally with 2,200 people participating worldwide. So since then, they have increased their support, and we want to thank them for that. So at this time, I'm going to pass the baton over to Denver to Jim Marchiori so he can get us kicked off. Jim?
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for the good introduction to the GEM program. So I don't want to take too long before we get right to our panel. You've been sitting here patiently through the videos and through the preparation. I just want to preface what we're doing today with a couple of remarks. one of the things that we really focus on in GEM is a balance of stakeholders. It is. Sorry. All right, sorry for the technical issue. One of the things that we really try to focus on is a balance of different kinds of stakeholder interests and a balance across the energy industry for how things work. That lends itself to a new dimension of political risk, which is what we're going to talk about here today. Are we still on? We're good? Okay. So without really further ado, what I want to do is just kind of preface that by saying that, political risk has a lot of different dimensions, a lot of different definitions, a lot of different points of view around different parts of the world and what it means. And what I hope to explore today with our two distinguished speakers is what that means, both on a conceptual framework and in a very practical way here in the United States and in Colorado. So welcome everybody here in the room. Welcome the people online worldwide. And with that, I think we'll just go ahead and get started. We'll go about 40 to 45 minutes of questions with the panel, and then we'll open up to questions from the audience, both in the room and online. The online questions will come through our Director of Operations, Sarah Derdowski, who's back there in the back, so she'll represent the online questions that come in. So if you're on questions, as Dave said, and we'll get started. So for both of our panelists, Brian and Stephen, the term political risk is used for a variety of different meanings, as I said just a second ago. Everything from somebody demonstrating at a drilling site or showing up at a town meeting to, nationalizing a facility in a developing host country somewhere or anything in between. How do you define political risk on a practical basis in your work day to day, and what aspect of it takes the most time and attention from you?
Go ahead, Brian. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I just want to commend the GEM program for its leadership and innovation. It's a very, very solid program, doing a lot in the community here in Denver, and I think is well recognized much beyond Colorado for the work it's done, and this is just helping aid that. And I commend all of you who are engaged in the program, whether as students, faculty, sponsors, partners, what have you. It's a very, very solid program, and I'm extremely impressed with the work that you're doing. Thank you as well for the opportunity to participate here today. I think political risk is a very, very interesting question. I think the world has changed in this sense over the past decade. I was talking with a couple of folks just before the session started here, and here we are in a day that the UK is voting on whether or not to stay in the EU. That's a big, big issue for lots of people across the pond. And it will change the face of Britain regardless of the outcome and its relationship with the EU on a going forward basis. So lots of uncertainty there for governments, lots of big questions in financial markets, et cetera. So I think it's a great example of how political risk just shows up for us every day. I think this used to be a topic that was talked about in the context of the oil and gas industry, which is the frame that I'll use today for my comments. It was a topic associated with unstable governments, largely foreign countries, things of that nature. My father spent a career in the Foreign Service, and never did he talk about the United States and political risk in the same sort of phrase or conversation. And I think over the last decade, that has changed significantly. Here in the U.S., and it is a very big issue for the oil and gas sector. And I think many of us would be surprised if we were sitting here 10 years ago to say that the United States would be an area that had significant political risk. And I think as someone said in the opening, what's happening is the above ground risks clearly are becoming much more prevalent in the United States in particular, and elsewhere as well, more so than the below the ground risks. So that changes the equation on where companies need to focus their time and attention. And it's an issue for Noble Energy that very much is front and center, and I'll talk about a few examples in a moment. I think from a Noble Energy perspective, we view this through kind of four lenses. or 5 lenses, I should say. One is, and I like to call it the shuns. It's legislation, it's regulation, taxation is a big issue, and then litigation. And then also community engagement. Community engagement's a really important part of what we do as a company here to help manage some of the political risks, to ensure that we're in touch with communities. So I'll stop there, Jim, and pass the baton to Stephen for a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Jim. Halliburton welcomes the opportunity and appreciates everyone taking the time to tune in today. My daughters, Grace and Callie, who are 10 and 13, and I'm doing everything I can to get them into the industry. When I told them I was speaking at Pink Petro, it's one of the most effective lines I've used. One wants to be a potter, and the other one wants to be on the U.S. women's national soccer team, so I got a lot of work to do, but this helps. Yeah, political risk for Halliburton and kind of how we view that is what my department does in government relations and in external affairs is no surprises for management, and that there's a lot of surprises in politics, and what we try to do is get ahead of everything that we think could potentially impact the company through various channels and resources and assets that we employ globally, but also assessing those risks to how real they are. Every legislature in Congress, there are hundreds of thousands of bills across the world and in the states that are introduced every year, but that doesn't mean they have a chance of rising to passage. So we, before we kind of alert business units and management as to what potentially could impact us, we have to assess it, and I would agree with Brian. Legislation, regulation, taxation are all key factors, but also a lot of states are looking and countries are looking at healthcare and how that's going to impact. We have a workforce of over 80,000 across the globe. Sometimes technology or patents, immigration issues as we try to move workers around the globe to service our customers. So there isn't a day where I don't think something comes into our office, usually something new. It's one of the great things about being in government relations. Every day is different. Mm-hmm. And the challenges don't stop. And then I'm sure we'll get into it a bit later, but what are the tactics and the assets that we use to try to educate decision makers and stakeholders about what the impacts may be to potential public policy. At the end of the day, we want to find solutions to these problems, and I think it falls largely on the industry to come up with those solutions, because we're actually the experts, and as many of you know, we're filled with engineers and scientists, and they like nothing more than to solve problems.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, if we think about risk essentially as being, anything that threatens your ability to execute strategy, essentially is what it is. And Brian, you said something in your, opening there that I caught my attention about the difference between above ground and below ground risk, and the fact that, over the last, 5-6 years, the hit rates for exploration have, risen astronomically. And, we've gone from a world where 30% was good to where we're, hitting 90% of the time now. And ironically, the risks have changed to a different place. What threatens the ability to operate is now in a different way. So what is it, on a day-to-day basis that takes the most of your attention right now? Is it local stakeholders? Is it, state governments and taxation? What is it that really takes your time these days?
Sure, yeah. I think Noble Energy, a handful of years ago, really started to recognize this above ground risk. We have operations here in the US, we have operations in West Africa, we have operations in Israel. And we began to see these issues emerging in a lot of these jurisdictions. And I think, it's a testament to our management who decided that indeed we really needed to begin to manage some of these above ground risks in a more developed way. And so they began a quest to bring on more capacity and capability in this space to build out the technical expertise that's required to address these issues. And I would say that, managing the political risk, managing these external issues is very much a part of what management do every day, without question. They have the teams in place, but in Israel, we've had a number of challenges there that we've worked through with governments. To Stephen's point, you really have to engage. You have to engage critically and be committed to achieving outcomes with governments.
Yeah, it's a very long, labor-intensive process of getting to know and educating key decision makers, whether they're elected officials, regulators, stakeholders where you operate, and other messengers, as well as some of the folks who supply Halliburton, right? We have a tremendous, and our employees, I'll also say, some of the tactics that we use, it's not an overnight solution. And as soon as we think we've addressed an issue by educating elected officials or key decision makers, and let me just say, just because you educate them doesn't mean that they're going to, make the decision that you wish to. Yeah. There's policy, and that's what we talk to them about, and solutions, and then there's politics. And I think, particularly in oil and gas, issues at the local level, at all levels. Most elected officials, I believe, through the efforts of the industry, understand our business, but they have constituents that they have to answer to as well, and it kind of puts them in difficult spots. And it's incumbent upon industry and us to find the sweet spot and develop public policy that they can support, and perhaps their constituents as well.
Does that education process with the leadership, the government officials, is that primarily like a one-on-one kind of dialogue sort of a process, or do you run, say, seminars or things like that for them?
I think it's a bunch. It's both, right? I do a lot at the state level. In the United States, most of the oil and gas policy is best managed at the state level, and I love working for at the state level because Congress doesn't do a whole lot, and state legislatures come in for a shorter period of time. They say we have to address this issue, and I've seen a number of different kind of scenarios. I think the best, and actually it goes to here in Colorado, Governor Hickenlooper, he puts both sides in the room and says, come up with a solution together, versus the one-on-one where we go in and then they bring in the other folks. I think it's more productive and efficient to have a dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Stephen. I think the frame I put this in is sort of policy engagement, and it's really critical, I think, for industries like ours that are oftentimes not well understood, that don't do a good job communicating with the public, haven't historically done a good job communicating with the public about what it is that we do. And I think, the reality in my head is that we have to engage in policy debates. We have to engage in policy development. The reality is, regulators can't do this stuff alone. They can't come up with the outcomes alone. They need input from various stakeholders. And I think our industry historically has said, okay, if there's a regulatory rulemaking, we just submit our comments and then go sort of back to our jobs. That's typically how engineers like to work. And the reality is you have to go a few steps beyond that. You actually have to go have a conversation, sit down, explain, try and help the regulators understand the practical implications of what an outcome might look like, and solve for ways to find other solutions potentially. So at Noble, we're very much engaged in the policy, informing the policy debates and trying to help regulators, legislators get to solutions, and I know Halliburton is as well. But I think they're responding to the public, and in the United States in particular, we are moving into areas that heretofore we weren't developing oil and gas, and we're bumping up against communities. And the reality is that we need to engage differently with them on a going forward basis, which is why we spend a lot of time, and I know colleagues at Halliburton do as well, engaging with the communities, trying to understand their issues, trying to provide context around our operations, and really get involved, become a real member of the community, because oftentimes our employees are living there as well. I think the engagement is a really critical success factor for our industry and for the development of policy going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that too. I think it's one of the things that's one of the cornerstones of part of what we teach in the GEM program.
Right.
What do you, I mean, following through on that, before, just some of my background, before I came to the university, I was in essentially gas for 30 plus years. And, so I've seen a lot of evolution of the industry over that time, from the early 80s until now. What are you seeing with, Brian, you mentioned that there's a new need to engage in ways that we haven't really done before, that the industry hasn't really done before, internally in your companies, in the operations groups, in the engineering groups, the senior leadership. How well is that new reality recognized, and what are the organizations doing internally to foster that kind of behavior, as opposed to the old school way of just get it done?
Yeah, so it used to be, I think, in many companies across this sector that folks that dealt with the external affairs issues were really just brought to the table when there was a problem, right? I see a lot of heads nodding. As opposed to being an integral part of the sort of project development. And I think you can learn very, very quickly how important it is to have those people at the table to help you identify risks and opportunities. I mean, this isn't all about risk, it's about opportunity as well. And I think I've certainly seen an evolution across the industry where people are dedicating staff, they're dedicating time and resource, they're reaching out to communities in a very deliberate way. And I think really at the end of the day, communities, regulatory and legislative outreach are really, really important aspects of what we can do as an industry to manage these issues collectively.
Yeah, at Halliburton, from management on down, they're committed to educating our workforce, as I know Noble and other companies here are, particularly in Colorado, given some of the things we're facing. However, I'll say when you look at some of our product service lines, and those are the divisions that we have, obviously hydraulic fracturing, which we call production enhancement at Halliburton, is heavily engaged and values government affairs, say more so than artificial lift. Sure. Because of the issues, just surrounding and based on the response, everyone understands that. So we are, and I don't think, and we don't think that this issue will ever be solved per se, right? We're going to have to work through probably every product service line that's involved with developing oil and gas will be brought into this debate at some point. So we want to take the lessons that we've learned and the tactics that we've done and kind of spread that proactively. And that's kind of a company-wide, countrywide thing. Clearly, it's a global issue. We don't, these are not unique to the United States. I think management recognizes that our workforce, our vendors are great assets to educate, and they're great messengers for us.
So have you found yourselves, as companies in your field operations in particular, but also just in general operations, doing things differently as a result of this emphasis than you might have done them 5, 10 years ago? And if so, what are some of those differences? What do they look like?
Yeah, we definitely do things. I will say where we have some of our field camps in the communities, that's where our folks live. That's where we spend a lot of our community investments. So most communities where we are and out of, let's just say Fort Lupton or in some of the fields, people love us, right? Because we're spending money at restaurants and, we're members of the community. All that said, as we move into newer areas, we're not going to mobilize around school hours, as an example. Or let's be aware of what are some of the heavier traffic times to lessen the impact. And if we're in rural areas and there's one exit to get on the interstate, let's try to work and let the county or local government know what it is we're doing and when is the best time we can mobilize. We're more flexible than some of the other families in there, and so we'll go the extra mile to adjust to accommodate them.
Yeah, that's good.
I would just add, Stephen, I think the industry's really begun to do a great job at developing best practices. The American Petroleum Institute has a recommended practices program that they've put in place where operators can sort of learn about some of the best practices that are working in particular areas. Stephen talked about reducing truck traffic, how to manage wastes, all sorts of things that we deal with on an everyday basis. But I think there's a very good community that exists out there for people to learn, to basically learn from the great examples that are being set in other places. And I think the industry always tries to reduce its impact. It always tries to minimize the impact on people, on the environment. I don't think we do a very good job, frankly, of talking about that, and we need to do a better job of that, of talking about the reductions in truck traffic that has a direct impact on communities, whether it's dust, air pollution, how we're moving things to pipelines, so products are transported, whether it's water or oil or natural gas through pipelines. We're not carrying it through trucks and through communities. And what I would say is, in our organization, and I know many others, people are very, very focused on reducing these impacts to communities. And we try to go a number of steps further, as I talked in terms of our community engagement programs, to really design programs that are fit for purpose that we can actually take to different parts of the world. So some things that we've done here in Colorado, we've replicated in other places, not just here in the US, but in Israel, for example. Yeah. And I think the collective learning that goes on in this industry is transferable without question. In terms of the community involvement, we try to build a couple of pillars out that really can work just about anywhere. So what we focus on in our space is education, because that's obviously a very critical issue for communities. It's critical for our industry. Environmental stewardship, obviously, we want to minimize the impacts. It's good business to do that. And then also health and wellness, making sure that we're engaging in the communities in places where we're able to have an impact to improve the lives of people. And Noble Energy has a purpose that is pretty simple, but it's what guides us every day. And it goes like this: energizing the world and bettering people's lives. And we try to live by that value statement every day. And it's a real fulfilling thing to be able to sort of put your hand on that kind of statement every day, and we really try to live up to it wherever we operate.
The transferability you mentioned, kind of is actually a nice segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about, because we have, as we know, a global audience for this. Noble operates in a number of different places, notably Israel and the United States. Halliburton, of course, is all over the world, pretty much almost every country on the globe. How much different is the management of political risk, stakeholder engagement, non-market decision-making, whatever terminology you want to put around it? How much does that vary in the different places where you operate, and how much differently do you have to manage it as a result?
So it's really on a case-by-case basis, but it is in the equation everywhere we operate. first and foremost understand the laws and the rules and the regulations that we have to comply with, and let's ensure that we have programs and also ways to track that we are complying with it. That could be local content. We have to have a certain number of folks in countries that we need to hire, things of that nature. Being respectful of the culture, regards to our employee workforce, our vendor workforce. So those are, it is an essential part of the equation wherever we go and operate. And so different countries have a different amount depending on, say, Norway is going to, who has a long history with the industry, and partnership is far different than some of these newer countries, onshore versus offshore. Mineral ownership is different across the globe than it is in the United States. We have private mineral ownership here. And so when you're looking at, say, expanding unconventional fields globally, the government is, in fact, typically the mineral owner, and that's going to slow some decisions or at least take longer than it does. And so there are some different considerations there as well.
I think, Jim, at the highest level, all companies have a process to manage risks. Enterprise risk management is a common tool that's utilized, and certainly political risk is a key element to that. So I think process-wise, it's the same. It's just different depending on the locations, as Stephen was saying. So you might have a different accent in West Africa than you might have in the Far East or the Middle East or somewhere else, because you have different issues. And I think the way that you manage through that process is you identify the risk or opportunity, you measure the impact, and then you mitigate or manage it, right? And you just apply those methods to whatever risk it is that you're managing. So I think it's largely a similar process, but just takes on a different face depending on where you are and what challenges you're facing.
Because of the specific interests of the locality.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Actually, I like what you said, Stephen, about just going back to things that are as simple as just respecting the local culture and so on, which you don't really think about necessarily as being a dimension of risk, but yet it's a way of preventing risk, if you like, more than anything else. And, a lot of times we don't see that as being part of the risk profile, but
to Brian's point, it's all about risk mitigation.
Yeah.
It's assessing and then devising strategies and protocols to reduce any kind of type of risk.
And I think, nobody likes uncertainty, right?
Right.
Business doesn't like uncertainty. Governments don't like uncertainty. Communities don't like uncertainty. Markets don't like uncertainty. So, I think this whole process lends itself to trying to mitigate that and to manage through it.
Yeah. So, we're getting, we got a few more minutes yet before we start taking questions. But as you look forward now over the next sort of short cycle and long cycle through the energy industry, we've got a lot of different dimensions that are affecting the industry, everything from climate to supply issues, all kinds of different things. What do you see as being the biggest sources of, say, risks or black swans or anything over kind of the next 5 years, and then also over the next maybe 15 or 20 years to the energy industry as a whole, but and to the oil and gas sector specifically?
I'd be happy for you to take that one first, Stephen.
Sure. I would say 10, 15 years ago when we would engage, and I was with an E&P company at the time, but we had the ability with stakeholders, particularly conservationists, environmental stakeholders, to actually craft policy solutions that we could unify together and go to the decision makers and say we have the industry and some conservation and environmental stakeholders agreeing that this is good public policy, and it allows both we're going to protect the environment while also produce resources. Today, we are facing really, a global movement called Keep It in the Ground, which I think many of you have heard of, and they do global demonstrations, and they're, advocating not public policy solutions. They're advocating that we, in fact, keep these resources in the ground. So we've lost a partner or the ability in one of our stakeholders. They pretty much refuse to come to the table so long as the drill bit's turning. That's unacceptable to them. And that complicates the ability to find public policy solutions that allow us to protect the environment and produce natural resources for the benefit of all. So one of the things unconventionals in the United States did, I think, is kind of politicize our industry even more. Pretty shocking when President Obama mentions hydraulic fracturing in the State of the Union. And then at a Democratic presidential debate, they ask him, what's your view on hydraulic fracturing? And Secretary Clinton gives a long kind of answer, and Bernie Sanders says, I'm against it. So the political, it's no longer about policy, it's about politics. And I think getting, and this I think could go across the globe, there's examples everywhere across the globe, but I think bringing it back to public policy is probably our biggest challenge, in trying to take it back from the politics of it. I think we run the risk of focusing too much on the politics, not the policy.
I think that's very well said. I fully agree with Stephen that energy has become highly politicized. It's unfortunate because it's such a critical aspect of everything we do in our daily lives. I mean, one of the things that I love to tell people about is I enjoy working in this industry because of what it provides for society. It's not just the light, the heat for our homes, the fuel for our vehicles, or the fibers for the carpet. It's plastics, it's medicines, it's things that are critical to us every day. We're here in Colorado. People enjoy the outdoors. How many actually know how essential oil and gas is to the products that they use to enjoy the outdoors, whether it's the water bottles, the helmets for climbers, the shoes, the outfits, the tires for bicycles, etc. So I think the importance for us as an industry is really engaging. It's engaging with communities, it's engaging with governments, it's engaging with stakeholders, because we have a long way to go. We have not been in this sort of practice area of engaging. We are an industry of engineers that typically sort of do their jobs and go home and come back and do their jobs. There's a lot more that has to go on now because of some of the dynamics that Stephen mentioned. And I think the importance of engagement can't be understated in that space.
And as you say, Stephen, we are going into, or we're not going into, we're in an election year. And you mentioned that the Democratic debates. Of course, you got at this point significant uncertainty over who wins what. Who wins the presidency? Which way does the Senate lean? Which way does even the House lean? What happens? How do you work to try to anticipate those kind of future directions without really knowing what they're going to be yet, and position yourselves to be able to function solidly whatever happens?
Well, we look at what their statements are and kind of what they say, and then we also look at their past actions as elected officials. As secretary, when Mrs. Clinton was Secretary of State, she did a lot to try to bring shale and unconventionals across the globe, and kind of what lessons and regulatory regimes could countries such as Poland employ to protect and develop resources in a very positive way, protecting the environment and as well as become energy independent. You know, the benefits of energy independence are not, you know, they're for any country that has resources. So we have to line that up with what she's saying, and is she's saying things because, you know, she has a legitimate challenge from Senator Sanders. It's hard to say, but we monitor that, and I think I have a tremendous amount of respect for anyone who runs for office, be it a city council, a school board, or president of the United States. I think it's an awful job, and it's very difficult to please everyone and answer to the constituents that they have to have. So I typically give them the benefit of the doubt that, you know, I don't necessarily wholeheartedly believe everything they say when they're running. It's kind of how they're going to operate when they're elected. That is more important. And so that being said, they'll come up with an energy plan regardless of who wins, and we'll assess it like we do all pieces of public policy and engage to make it more effective or you know, tolerable or, you know, good public policy. We believe good public policy is good politics. So if they hit that sweet spot, they will be rewarded by their constituents. And I think, to my earlier comments, that's becoming more in jeopardy.
I think it's really important to be in touch with the trends. You know, what's happening at the local level? Are governments promoting ordinances, things of that nature? You really need to be in touch to figure out which direction the wind is blowing. At the state level, do you have, you know, a House that's a little bit anti-industry and a Senate that might be a little more supportive of it? Understand how to manage within that context. At the federal level, understanding where the trends are with respect to regulations, legislative measures. Are they willing to engage kind of an all the above energy policy? If not, you know, what can you do to promote all sources of energy? And I think engaging in that way is an evergreen, good for all seasons way of doing things. And I think our industry does indeed embrace all forms of energy, because the reality is, in order for our economies to grow and us to do the things that we believe are right, whether it's mitigating environmental impacts or otherwise, we have to have all sources of energy. So I think it's really important to recognize the trends and where things are headed.
Good, thank you. I think you guys ready for some questions?
Sure.
Okay. I think we're ready.
We just had a few.
To take. I mean, good questions from smarter people than me. We're ready to take some questions from the audience. I think we'll do what, Sarah? Maybe about 10 minutes in the room, and then do some online questions. So, microphone's right here. If you've got a question, please just step up, introduce yourself, and have at it.
Mark Bernardi with Kahuna Ventures. How do you overcome reluctance to change, be it regulatory or policy within your organization? Not everyone's super happy within the industry of the direction things are going. How do you communicate that that's the way things are and they need to follow these rules?
Comply, don't complain. It is critically important, I think, for all organizations involved in oil and gas development. They need to engage in these policy debates, because how it impacts Halliburton. Now, we're a service company, right? So we see this from a variety of customers. We want to service all oil and gas companies, and they have a different tolerance of regulation that they can handle. And so I think it's just a matter of engaging. But we are seen as one, and it's critical that as an industry, all of us comply with these regulatory issues. And everyone, I think, does for the most part now. But I think you can join trade associations at the state and federal level. talk to other operators and how they're dealing with it, talk to service providers, look for solutions. But it's critical to get ahead of it and express how a regulatory change might impact your company differently than, say, someone else.
Yeah, I would just add, I think the reality is regulations are changing, and we as an industry have to recognize that. The United States has been blessed with this shale revolution and the abundance of natural resources here. They are in places that we previously didn't contemplate them being, and so as a result, we need to behave differently. And I think companies, it's competitive advantage, frankly, to engage and be on the front edge of that, as opposed to the back edge of that. I think people are starting to realize that, and as is a commonly used phrase, we're only as good as our weakest link, and we really need to succeed in this space in order to be successful ultimately as an industry.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
I'll just ask a quick question and then I'll go ahead and sit down. My name is Yvonne Gray. I'm actually representing myself just out of curiosity. Can you more talk about how you have sharpened strategic insight into the potential risk-adjusted performance outcomes, of course, within that compliance? So basically, how have you sharpened strategic insight into the potential risks while you're trying to cover the needs for the communities, the political needs, the compliance issues that may arise? How do you figure out or hone in more on how you're going to handle that within the management groups as well as while you're doing the work? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'll take
go ahead and sit down. Thank
Okay. I think it's a really good question. I think the question you're asking is, you're into a new dimension here, and how do you sort of manage all of these important aspects? Is that, yeah?
That works.
Okay. So I think what we try to do, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, is be a little forward-leaning, right? Understand the community issues and concerns, work with regulators, try to identify solutions. And as Stephen said, here in Colorado, I think they've done a great job of working with stakeholders, with communities, with NGOs, environmental groups in the industry and the state to try and find solutions. And I really do believe that Colorado is leading the way in terms of creating robust solutions, and frankly, a lot of them have been replicated in other states. So, what do they say? They say imitation is the greatest form of flattery, right? So I think Colorado has a good framework. I think other states can do well to replicate that, and I think the industry really, again, just needs to sort of lean into this a little bit and engage. And I think you find solutions when people come together, right? You'll always learn a little bit more about another person's perspective when you have a conversation.
I think from Halliburton's perspective, it's very similar to what Brian said. It's we have policies and procedures for pretty much everything we do. And if there's an incident, let's investigate why. It's one thing to have it on paper, it's another thing in practice. And that goes for regulations as well, to be honest with you. And if there is an incident, let's do some analysis as to how we can prevent this going forward. And then if there's an incident that isn't ours, let's also look at that. There are a tremendous amount of metrics on health and safety. Our board looks at that, every board meeting we have, and as do other companies. And so there's a lot of attention paid to not only the policies and procedures that we have, but how effective they are. And so there's a whole group of people that focus on a daily basis globally how to get better at that.
Hi, Keelan Houtman, Whiting Oil and Gas Corporation. Obviously, over the past 5 years, social media has had a huge effect on our industry and society as a whole. I'm just curious how you think oil and gas has stepped up to that challenge, and where you see room for improvement.
continuous improvement, right? I think as to both mine and Brian's comments, we're behind the 8 ball when it comes to educating the general public about what it is we do and how we do it. But in terms of social media, we're on all the social media channels, and we're pushing out marketing material really for our customers, because the millennials are now coming into the workforce, and that's where they kind of get information. I would probably say we could improve about pushing more stuff out to the general public. Right now it's focused on customers, but we recognize its importance, and it's a medium that many are going to. So it's an area that I think we need to do better in, but I think we're aware of that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a great question. It is one of the primary means of communication now for society, and it's continuing to grow in terms of the key methods. I'll give you a couple of examples. Here in Colorado, just as an example, a couple of years ago we faced some ballot measures that would impact the ability for us to continue to operate. We're facing some again now. And we had some experts come in and do some social media analysis. And the analysis told us that there were 50 opposition messages to every one pro-industry message. And so we began to understand very quickly we needed to change that balance. And so we have formed a number of different organizations here. I won't get into the details of those. One called Coloradans for Responsible Energy Development, which is really just a tool to educate the public and to provide them resources. Well, now the dynamic has changed to a point where we're actually delivering more messages than the opposition is. So I think it's changed the nature of the conversation in Colorado around oil and gas development. It's changed the nature of the conversation around hydraulic fracturing. The polls actually show that in this state, and I think also we need to begin to, as I pointed out a little bit earlier, is begin to point folks to how essential oil and natural gas is to their everyday lives. The sweater that you're wearing, the glasses that are on your head, the name badge that you have. I mean, all of them are either derived from oil and gas or manufactured by oil and gas. And we need to, as a society, I think, begin to help each other understand how important this stuff is, not allow these issues to be highly politicized. I think my dream is that we can actually move into a different conversation around energy.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
My name is Mark Roberts. I have a public relations firm that manages a journalistic effort that includes a radio program all about energy called Empowering Colorado. And I kind of wanted to follow up on what you had just said about CRED and Protect Colorado. And I was curious if, in retrospect, and looking at the effectiveness of the two groups, that if you had to do it over again, would you set them up differently? Would you take a different approach? Would you do anything different in the way that you geared those organizations towards educating the public and developing public policy?
I think there are always lessons to learn, Mark. Thanks for the question. I think the main effort that Coloradans for Responsible Energy Development, the main focus rather was to educate the public, to try and provide a forum so that things like hydraulic fracturing weren't taboo issues. Could we have done things differently? Yes, but I think on the whole, it's been an effective organization. I think more direct public engagement might have helped us be more effective on the front end. It's largely been a digital platform and doing a lot of things in the community, community engagement, things of that nature. We could have beefed up some areas or others, but I don't have any criticism per se for it. I'd love your views. We can talk afterwards if you have some ideas, but I think we're trying to do a little bit of everything, and I think we're doing it reasonably well, but always welcome and open to constructive comments. I don't know if Stephen has a view.
The oil and natural gas industry, the industry, right, has a million different opinions. And I think when companies take a lead to go out there and do something. And oftentimes within our own industry, they hear more criticism than they deserve. This is a difficult challenge for us, and one that I think managements across the globe are investing heavily in. But I think it's a great effort and a great tool to kind of get out there and specifically address some of the issues in Colorado.
I would maybe just add, we have seen organizations in a couple of other states try to mimic and create similar structures. So the concept works. It's just, you have to tailor it for different audiences. So I think that's probably a sort of tick in the box against whether it's been successful or not.
And if you look at them, there's the majors and the independents. I think there's a reason they're called independents, because they like to do things their own way. And whether that's drilling wells or educating the public, the fact we're drilling wells and educating the public are all very good things for us right now, I think.
Did you want to? Okay, so Sarah's going to start to bring in some questions now from the web viewers.
So this one's from Scott. He wants to know, why isn't energy more a part of the election in the U.S.? And are we really in a decline or just a dip? And this is directed at both of you.
It's a very unique election in the United States this cycle. It will become, I think if you look on the Democratic side, it is part of the debate, for sure. So I think it'll always be, energy will always be part of the mix and at varying degrees, for sure, particularly given the abundance that we have in the United States. I think it's, in terms of the rebound in the industry, hopefully it's sooner rather than later. And it's probably going to take longer than most of us want, and it's been pretty severe for sure.
In terms of where the energy markets are, I certainly don't have a crystal ball, but I'm hopeful that we're heading to a different place. I wish energy was more of an issue, and I wish some of the things we've talked about here today were more tabletop discussions, as opposed to focusing on things like hydraulic fracturing and demonizing a practice and demonizing an industry. I think there's a whole lot of negativity in the energy conversation, and I expressed my desire and wish that it would be a more rational conversation, because it's very important, and we are blessed here in the United States, as are many other countries, to have significant and abundant resources that we can develop for the long term, and while we move to other alternatives.
This will be the last question. It's dealing with workforce. With all the new people leaving the industry, what opportunities do we have in this new era of energy?
Do you want to continue with the Stephen Wade and Brian Miller, or you want to change?
Well, being a commodity, we've experienced booms and busts in the past. And I think the lessons that we've learned there, particularly in the 80s, that there's far more petroleum programs in universities across the globe. I think people are starting to and I think industry recognized, because of what happened in the 80s, I think there's a billboard, the big crew challenge. We need young people to come into this industry. And I think over the last probably 10 years, there have been strategies collectively on what we can do to bring more people into oil and gas. And hopefully, when the market rebounds, there'll be plenty of opportunity for folks.
Yeah. I think this is a great industry. It's one of the world's great industries, and it's a wonderful place to work. The people and the variety of things you get to work on and with is just phenomenal. I've been in this industry for almost 20 years and continue to be amazed at the types of people and the innovation. And I think in this period, if you're in the industry, our CEO, Dave Stover, has said, these are opportunities for people to make careers for themselves. it gives you a chance to really focus on what's important and be real innovative, to take on new tasks, things of that nature. And oftentimes when people put their hands up and take on different opportunities, that is certainly recognized. And I think there's a huge upside for people in the industry today. For those who are contemplating it, I would say, yes, it is a cyclical industry. There are a lot of other cyclical industries out there. Those that tend to do a good job and perform well often survive through the down cycles. But it is a wonderful place to experience lots of different things. And I think, as we've said today, it has so much more breadth today, this industry does, than it did maybe 10, 15 years ago. The things that Stephen and I do every day are a very integral part of the industry, and companies' focus on the external world is critical. So I think there's no limit to the opportunities and to where this industry will go.
Good. Thank you. So I think that's basically our time for here in Denver. Thanks. I want to thank everybody for coming and for tuning in via the internet. We're going to cut back to Katie Mehnert in just a minute for a couple of closing remarks, but especially thank you to Brian and Stephen for taking the time and serving as guinea pigs, as you said earlier, for our first worldwide broadcast here. So
thank you.
Again, thank you very much.
Appreciate the opportunity.
I think we're ready to jump back to Katie.
Great. Thanks so much, Jim. So I just want to say thank you so much to all of you who are participating with us today in the room and across the world. I had a vision, 4 years ago, sitting in business class next to a gentleman. We had a conversation about the energy workforce, and we had a differing point of view, but that actually got me the courage to put together Pink Petro and to launch Pink Petro. And I want to thank Halliburton and Shell and KPMG for their ongoing support, and UC Denver and the GEMS program for all the things that you're doing to bring innovative education to the forefront to help this next generation get engaged. And I want to say, Brian Miller, I'm taking you to lunch. I'm coming to Denver. Your dream is so that we can move to a different conversation around energy using social media, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here with Pink Petro. So we believe that women bring a unique perspective to the conversation, but we believe men bring the conversation too. We need to get everybody into the conversation, because what we do, as you all said so well, is so important. We power things, we do things that make our world run, and I think that's a story that's very undervalued. So at this point, I'm going to kick it back to Dave in the studio in DC, and thank you so much to everyone. If you are interested in Pink Petro, we are interested in you. We'd love for you to join as a member. You can be an individual member, you can be a corporate member, a corporate sponsor, or even sponsor things like today's programming. We aim to be broadcasting more frequently with time. So thanks so much. Dave, back to you in DC.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you everybody for joining. Brian, Jim, Stephen, and we hope Tracy feels better. We can hopefully have her here next time. Again, we've answered some inquiries here. There will be, within 24 to 48 hours, an archive on demand of this webcast today, so you can look at it again and also send it out to your fellow members and friends. From our studios here near Washington, D.C., Pink Petro TV, I'm Dave Gardy. Thanks for joining us.
How we grow depends on the questions we ask. Who am I? Why am I here? But one question inspires us like no other. How? Because how is curious. It looks at the world differently. How can answer your questions. It expands the world around you, and your mind with it. One day, How looks you right in the eye and asks, how'd you do that? But the real question is, how will you change the world?
The GEM program combines all of the traditional strong background of an MBA with a special focus on energy.
It's a program to teach people how to run important energy companies.
It's a unique collaboration between academia and industry. The ability to combine those two things, the academic higher education environment, along with the challenges that the industry faces, is really a unique combination and a win-win.
Our workforce needs this program in a significant way because it does allow us to expand our thinking beyond traditional energy sources and starts to consider the possibilities and the actual applications of renewable energy sources.
If you want your top technical talent to understand how to manage a company and how to take it to the next generation, you're going to need the folks graduating from GEM.
Here's to breaking more glass ceilings in golf and everywhere else. KPMG, continuing our commitment to the next generation of women leaders.
We believe women bring a unique perspective to the world, and we want to harness it.
We believe in diversity, not just in a gender, but in generations, ethnicities, and cultures.
We believe by connecting our community to high-quality resources and learning, we will create an energy workforce
that is engaged, empowered, and inspired. We aspire to put a human face on an industry
that has quietly powered some of the most amazing technologies and innovations of our time.
We unite, connect, develop, and grow women in energy.
We are Pink Petro.